Hello and welcome everybody to today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd just like to go over a few things very briefly. This is a webinar format, which means your microphones and your video is turned off. If you would like to chat with the panelists and with each other, please go ahead and utilize the chat button, and you can ask questions regarding this presentation today using the Q&A button. You can remain anonymous and you can ask your questions at any time. If you would like to go ahead and activate closed captions, you can do so on the bottom of the panel on Zoom. And this webinar is recorded, so the recording should be available later today or tomorrow. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to Dave. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Velma. I'll repeat Velma's welcome to our Edge user group for October. As you know, most of you would know anyway, we do this every third Thursday of the month, and it's just a chance for us to talk about developments, responses that the committee has made to questions from Edge users, changes and updates in the Edge credential advice, and sometimes we have an exciting, enlightening round at the end. Normally, Jasmine Cedi-Kernert would handle this next part, but she is attending a conference today. But here are the members of the IESC, International Standards Council, and we have two new fellows that will be talking about their project a little bit later. We can talk about the ISC. As you know, the ISC meets to basically form the credential advice and the content of Edge. So whenever there's a place, we don't call them placement recommendations anymore, but the credential advice is determined by a vote from the members of the committee. There are some non-voting members, such as myself, my colleague Juliet Finaki, who sit in on those, and some other advisory people. But they are the ones who meet of their own free will, in addition to their numerous responsibilities at their own institutions, to make sure that we have a basic vetting of all the information that makes the Edge database kind of unique amongst other things that you might see offered within the United States anyway. Okay, so we can go on. And I think we're going to go to agenda here. As you can see, we have, as far as content, we have, this is in response to a user question from some months ago about the Bachelor of Vocation, Master of Vocation degrees, which are not the same as the old, Bachelor of Commerce vocational, and they have kind of a different format. We'll be talking about Bachillerato in the Dominican Republic. Another user question about civil economic examen in Sweden, and the length in Edge as opposed to the length of credentials that people are seeing. And we've got a long-awaited discussion of the Zeugnis der Allgemeinen Hochschulreife in Germany, and what we might do with the 12 and 13-year iterations of that, depending on the Länder. So without further ado, we'll dive into it.
Yeah. So one of the things that Dave really did help to highlight is that that these questions that we've got on the front end that we've highlighted here, they've come from you. They've come from Edge users that have identified areas where we could provide additional clarification. Nancy, one of the things that our fellows are going to be clarifying is a little bit of something to do with India, right? On the next slide, we're going to talk about what our fellows are going to be working on for this this project coming up.
Great. Thanks, Drew. Appreciate it. There should be, went one too far ahead. You could go backwards about the fellows. Should be there. Well, it was there a while ago. But okay, I'm going to talk. Hi, greetings from Chicago. I'm going to talk about the new cohort of fellows of Edge. Once a year, we open up applications for individuals to apply as fellows to work on a project decided by the ISC group. And they get to participate in all the email conversations as well as the webinar, the biweekly meetings that we have of the EDGE group. This year, we have 2 new fellows, Colleen Bailey from Temple University and Deborah Mamuti from University of Alabama. And they are going to be working on a project about Indian grading scales, some historical background, various grading scales, and they just got started on it literally this week. So we are working with them. The project, the fellows mentors per se, there we go. The fellow mentors are myself, Nancy Katz, Shelby Cleary, who is on the webinar today, and Leslie Eicher as well. In the past, we've had 3 other cohorts of fellows. The first group did a white paper on advanced credit for secondary school credentials. And I think at some point, Drew is going to put a link to that in the chat so you can download that. The second cohort worked on offshore medical schools. And that was quite an extensive laundry list of educational institutions that offer medical degrees in offshore, generally in the Caribbean, West Indies area. The third cohort, which they are finalizing their white paper, it's called, let's hope I got it right, Globalization, Mobility, and European Credentials. The Bologna process. It's dealing with credit for Bologna type degrees. And that white paper hopefully will be completed by the end of this year. And then, as I said, this fourth cohort is working on Indian grading systems. And you've got something right there. Be on the lookout next summer. I would say June, July at the latest, for applications to become a fellow and to work on a project and research and participate in the discussions of all these credentials and the recommendations of where they fit into the U.S. educational system. So, anything else, Drew?
No, I think that's a pretty good overview of kind of how we're going to get started with all of that. Yep. I mean, we can stay down in the subcontinent and talk a little bit more about the Bachelor of Vocation and the Master of Vocation. But for that, I think, Emily, you were going to come on to talk about that.
Yes, absolutely. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Excellent. So a colleague and EDGE user had requested that we look into and include the Bachelor of Vocation and Master of Vocation in EDGE. And what happened is that about a decade or so ago, there was an emphasis on aligning higher education with the needs of the economy and just providing more skills-based training overall. So what happened was that in 2014, the University Grants Commission launched the 3-year Bachelor of Vocation, which follows Standard 12. And the idea was that these programs would prepare industry-ready graduates. As many of us have seen or heard with the National Education Policy, this bachelor's degree would or does have multiple exit points. So as one example, if a student completed 1 semester of study successfully, but for some reason had to leave the program, they would receive a certificate. And then if it were 1 year, again, if it was done successfully and they had to leave, then it would be a diploma or an advanced diploma after 2 years of study. If the student completed the full 3-year program, they would be awarded then a Bachelor of Vocation or BVOC. On to the next slide, please. Thank you. So these programs were developed under the National Skills Qualifications Framework, addressing specific competencies on the national occupational standards, if they exist within that field or major. On your right, you'll see examples of different possible areas of study. It's not obviously exhaustive, but by any means, this is just a sampling. So you'll see, for example, electronics manufacturing, graphics and multimedia, food processing technology, whatever it may be, you will see here that it is very specific and very applied, and that the focus is work integrated study, such that when you look at the mark sheets or the curricula, you'll see that it often has an internship component in each term or semester of study, starting with semester 1. So that's how it differs from other bachelor degree programs, if you will. On to the next slide. Thanks. So because it does have this special feature that sets it apart from other bachelor's degree, the question is then, what is the comparability? And in no uncertain terms, the University Grants Commission has clarified and confirmed that the BVOC is regarded as a bachelor level degree. You will see a reproduction of a letter that the UGC issued on the right here. And what they say is that, for example, if you have a government job or a further program of study in higher ed whereby the entry requirement is a bachelor's degree in any discipline, BVOC holders would satisfy that requirement and be eligible. So I just want to repeat that. For any government jobs or higher programs of study that require for entry a bachelor's degree of any discipline, BVOC holders would satisfy that requirement and be eligible. So when we say it does give access to further study, what do we mean by that? In most instances, it's going to be, for example, the postgraduate diploma, the MBA, or the Master of Vocation. So as you can see, it makes sense that while they can go on to further study, it tends to be the more applied degrees, right? At the end of the day, because of how it's viewed by the UGC, we do treat it like any other 3-year bachelor degree in India, such as the BCom, BA, and we regard it as equivalent to, well, for the credential advice, yeah, as equivalent to 3 years of study. The BVOC can have some name variation, so you might see Bachelor of Vocational Studies as well, or the Bachelor of Vocational Education. It's all the same credential at the end of the day. Next slide. So I also mentioned the MVOC. So subsequently in 2015, the University Grant Commission announced the introduction of the Master of Vocation. And so it represents the very common 3+2 sequence in India. So the MVOC on its own is 2 years following the 3-year BVOC or other undergraduate degree. Holders do have access then to the MBA and in many instances the PhD. So again, we would treat the placement or the equivalency or comparability to any other similar 3+2 sequence for India. And so the BVOC and MVOC together would be regarded as comparable to the US bachelor degree. The documentation for both the MVOC and the BVOC are the same. So you'll see mark sheets, university issued degree certificates. The thing to note though is that although the BVOC and MVOC are being offered, you're not seeing it in droves. It's in terms of the number of offerings or degrees being awarded, it's still below the more popular and common BCom, BA, BS, etc. All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Emily. I volunteered to do the Swedish information here. Basically, what happened was that we did hear from an edge user who actually sent in a credential and said, "Could you please review the entry in Edge Sweden for the civilekonom examen, which says that it's 3 years and therefore 3 years of undergraduate credit." The individual said, "But I've only seen 4. Here's an example." So I didn't could you tell me more about the 3-year degree, or should it even have been in there? And so Emily nicely wrote up a 4-year one that we can now put in Edge. It's not in there yet, but we'll try to get that in fairly soon if everybody agrees with Emily's write-up, which looks pretty good to me. However, I got to thinking that it seems to me that there was a 3-year one. So I went digging, found one source, which was the IERF New Country Index Volume 1 that came out in 2004, mentions a 3-year civil economic examen, although it did point out that it is, at that time, which is now almost 20 years ago, was comparable to the Kandidat economic examen. And but then I wanted another source, and so I dug into the 1995 peer volume on Sweden, which is scanned to Edge, although I've got the hard copy and it's easier just to reach over to my bookshelf and grab it. And sure enough, Kathleen Zanotti, who wrote that book, points out that there was a 3-year one. At that time, the credits that Sweden used, called poäng, were 40 full-time 40 credits per year full-time, so that a 3-year degree was 120 Swedish poäng, and that a 4-year one would be 160. There was a 120 3-year economic examen. What I'm unclear about is whether it was routinely called civil econom at that time or not. Point is that there probably was both. One that ended on July 1993 at 3 years, and another that they've had since that Emily's written up for us. And of course, we've got the Bologna compliant model. The Swedes say that their HP, as you see there on the slide, the högskolepoäng, are compatible. This is the word that we all thought was humorous, compatible with ECTS credits. So hope to do a little more research and get something up in Edge on that for our user. Now let's go to the next there. Thank you. This one's a little different. Most of the time when we have these webinars and we talk about credential information that we've come across, it's because of an Edge user's question that's come in. This one was not an Edge user. In fact, it was an individual, a non-Edge user, who found out about Edge from a user. Basically, a U.S. citizen mother, her daughter went to school in Saxony, in Germany, and did an Abitur, so Allgemeine Hochschulreife, and then went to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is an Edge user. The Office of Admissions did not grant her credit for her Abitur because it was a 12-year Abitur. And if you go into Edge right now, you will see 2 entries for the Zeugnis der Allgemeinen Hochschulreife, one for a 12-year one for a 13-year one, and differential credential advice. No credit for the 12, up to a year of credit for the 13. Now, a little bit of history before I get back to the mother and the daughter in Virginia Tech. And that is, first of all, West Germany, Federal Republic of Germany, the BRD, had all of its state or Länder with 13-year Abitur. They called it G9. In fact, it's called that today. G9 stands for 9 years after gymnasium. That's predicated on the idea that these 9 years came after 4 years of Grundschule, or conversely, a G8, known sometimes colloquially as the Turbo Abitur, and it was 8 years after that 4th grade. And so what happened is that all of West Germany had 13-year Abiturs, and then of course you have reunification in 1990. All the schools in East Germany, the DDR, the Deutsche Demokratische Republik, all had 12-year Abiturs. And October of 1990, as the East German Parliament is dissolving East Germany, the DDR, and preparing for reunification, they divided the territories there in East Germany into 5 states. Basically, it was Brandenburg, Saxony, Sachsen-Anhalt, Thüringen and Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. And none of these, even as they were created, had 13-year Abiturs. They still had only 12-year Abiturs. And so now they were going towards reunification. West Germany decides, you know what? Let's try to avoid an us versus them kind of situation, and let's start to move away from the 13-year Abitur. But of course, the irony is that immediately those five East German states, 3 of them, Brandenburg, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, and Sachsen-Anhalt, all created a 13-year Abitur. Saxony, never had one. They always have had 12 years, both in the past and in the present. And so the funny part, most of you know this story, is that as the first decade of this century began to move forward, you had this move from G9 to G8, and then suddenly you had immense criticism and complaining from parents and students that because they did not change the curriculum, and that's true, they did not change the curriculum. What they did was to have the German students do the same curriculum in 12 years instead of 13. And this put added pressure on them, caused the students to complain, their parents to complain, and slowly the states, the Länder, started to move away from it. Bavaria was among the first, I believe, in 2017 announced it. By 2018, they had reinstituted it. Others have followed suit. Saxony, however, has not. So I'm going to have to finish this by saying that we're going to go to Robert's dictum about credit from high school. U.S. international admissions officers at universities here do not want to grant credit for work done in high school, however advanced the curriculum. However, should that upper secondary experience transcend the American model into 13 years, or even in the case of Iceland, 14, then we might want to stop and consider the possibility of credit from that study. And as all of you know, GCE levels, a prime example, advanced levels, CEGEP, DEC from CEGEP, the Italian Maturita, and a couple of other examples as well. So when Germany returned to the 13-year Abitur, G9, then we began to consider the possibility of advanced credit. One of the reasons is it enables us to take that 3-year Bologna-compliant first degree in Germany, bachelor of 180 ECTS, and suddenly say, wow, we've got 13 plus 3. We could accept the German bachelor provided that student had done a G9, a 13-year Abitur, and thus be able to accept those for graduate admission and so on. But the biggest discovery from all of this was to the mother, and I guess I volunteered to Drew to write a nice diplomatic response to the mother. Saxony never had a 13-year system. It's not a question of our having said one thing about Saxony and then changed it back again. Saxony never had 12 years. Virginia Tech, UT Austin, and most of you out there would never have given credit for that 12-year Abitur from Saxony. So naturally, we'll be glad to continue to look at this issue as more states go back to the 13-year Abitur. But that's been the IESE stance, and I suspect it will remain that. But we're always open to ideas and suggestions from you all, the users out there. And Drew, back to you.
Thank you, Robert. This is one of those opportunities that I will just jump in there to say, if you do identify anything within Edge that you believe merits updating, there's a contact us button present there on each page within Edge that you can reach out to us and let us know what you found the issue to be. When you can provide redacted documentation that protects personally identifiable information about students, those are very helpful documents for us to review as well. As Robert was mentioning earlier when we were talking about Swedish credentials, having a 3-year, having a 4-year to look at these things to see when they were issued, to really understand understand how the implementation of laws was trickling out into the actual implementation within schools was taking place. Germany, this was a great example of something that we wanted to highlight some information that might be useful to all of you, not just with this credential, but applying some of those philosophies on how you develop your own internal systems. At this point, we're going to switch over and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the updates that are happening within Acro, but we want to have a little bit of discussion with what you guys have. This Dominican Republic credential that we're going to talk about is something that has come in directly from a user. And I want you to put your questions directly down into the Q&A right below. We've got a couple that are already coming in, and we want to be able to answer your questions at the end of this. Shelby, can I hand this to you?
You certainly can. Hello, everyone. As Drew mentioned, we received a question from a user along with this redacted certificate, and the user was basically asking, is this a GED equivalent? Is this a new credential that needs to be added to EDGE? This particular document is the certificación that is issued at the end of upper secondary study. And so this is actually for the bachillerato, and there are two different entries already in the EDGE Dominican Republic entry for the bachillerato. So it's not a new credential. And the Dominican Republic doesn't have a GED per se, but what they do have is something that you'll see in a lot of Latin American countries. It's Educación para Jóvenes y Adultos, or Education for Youth and Adults. So if someone doesn't finish secondary education, actually they don't finish primary education at the normal time for whatever reason, once they reach a certain age, they're allowed to come back and they can partake in the education that they missed, and they'll receive the same credential. It's just in a different modality. So if you'll notice on the document, and I'm pointing at it on my screen, like you can see where I'm pointing, but you'll notice where it says Bachillerato Mención General, that's the Bachillerato, the general baccalaureate for Educación Media, middle education, and the modality is the general modality. So this leads me to believe that this is somebody that actually took it at the appropriate time, but I don't know that for sure. And then this is the certificate, or what we in my office would consider the diploma. There should be a transcript along with this that shows the years of study, the courses taken, and the grades earned, and that's usually issued by the school. Down at the bottom, you'll see a blacked out box. This contains a QR code, and then it also contains a barcode, and underneath that barcode is a number. And there should be information there that says you can verify the certificate. The Ministry of Education in the Dominican Republic has a really nice verification site where you can verify not only the Bachillerato certificate, but you'll see something mentioned on this certificate, Pruebas Nacionales de Conclusión. That's the national concluding test that students take at the end of secondary school. It's not a separate credential, but it's a test that they have to take in order to meet the requirements, the coursework requirements in this test, in order to receive this certificate. So to answer the user's question, this is not a separate credential, and I don't believe that this particular version represents youth and adult education. I think this is actually somebody who took it as a teenager at the appropriate time. But if you've got any questions, or if I can answer any other information about the Dominican Republic, just pop it in the Q&A or send us an email, and we'll be happy to answer that for you. Back to you.
Thanks, Shelby. So Shelby has encouraged all of you to reach out to her, and one way that you can reach out to all of us is through some services that Acro provides. On the next slide, I want to talk about one of those things that we've got for you. It's coming out. We're going to be transitioning over to something called the Acro Exchange. So many of you, if you are active within Acro, may participate in some of our listservs, may participate in some of our Google groups. Acro is switching everything over so that we go into this exchange. This is going to be uniquely available to members, and so it's going to be a community where you know that all the advice that's coming is that we're having best practices reinforced, and you know that the people that are reaching out and that are answering all of these questions have been engaged, are getting those member benefits, are getting those tools and techniques that we are trying to teach about how you can work with all of these credentials. This is something that if you are already signed up for the International Activities Group, next week, you're going to get notification about this. This is not something that's going to happen immediately. This is something that's going to be phased in over the next couple of months. But it is, as I mentioned, uniquely available to Acro members. And so for those of you that are not yet members of Acro, if you reach out to us, I can put you in contact with our membership department, or you can go on the acro.org website and find out all of those member benefits that are available for you. One of those things is going to be a discounted rate on Edge. So on the next page, we talk about some of those rates for Edge. We just had a change in pricing. For anyone that had an invoice that was issued ahead of time, we are going to honor that earlier rates. For anyone that has an existing subscription that'll be expiring at some point in the next year, we're not reaching out to you for the difference. At that point, that's when the new pricing structure will go into effect. On the next one, we just talk about one other opportunity that is available to all of you. If you are interested in doing some research, if you're interested in contributing to the field, we do have opportunities for some grants, and you can find information about the Gloria R. Nathanson Research Fund for International Education. But I want to hear some of the questions that all of you have put in here. Belma, before we get to all the Q&A, we never ran a poll earlier to find out who was here with us. Can we run that while we've got a couple of people thinking about all of their questions? I want to know who's here today. I want to know, are you already an Edge subscriber? I want to know, have you been to one of these user groups before? And I want to know who you're here representing. I've been told from a couple of individuals that they've reached out for an Edge free trial and they did not get notification about that. I've gone back in and I'm looking through everything to figure out what has happened with that. So if you are one of the people that has reached out for an Acro Edge free trial and have not received it, I am working on that actively. But it looks like we've got most of our answers in here. And for the one of you that is not already an Edge subscriber, please reach out. I can get you that that sample, that trial access to Edge, where you can look at it for a week, see if it's going to be something valuable for you. Many of you have been with us before. Welcome to all of you who have not been here yet. We typically will have various representatives from the IESC that'll come on, talk about the work that they're doing, talk about the research that they've taken on, talk about just important topics that are developing within education and things that you should be aware of. So it's a great opportunity to connect with, frankly, some rock stars in the field. About 90% of you are here with institutions. One of you is here representing some government entity, some ministry, and we have no representatives from law firms today. But I want to know everything that, I think that's what I wanted to know. I want to know what you had questions about. Dave, can you help find the right way for us to answer all of these questions in an effective order?
Absolutely, Drew, and I'm going to just assign people and force them to do it, of course. Our first question kind of comes in on the heels of the German question. It's somewhat related, and thank you, Robert, for popping up there. The first question involves 3-year Lebanese licence after the Bach, the Bach Part 2, right, as it used to be called, and we can talk a little bit about the real length of that the baccalaureate program.
I'll be glad to, Dave.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Everybody can read the question.
The question is basically, Edge Lebanon has 2 entries for the first degree from universities. One is clearly aimed at U.S.-style institutions. The 2 that immediately come up are AUB, American University of Beirut, and Lebanese American University, used to be called BUC. Both employ U.S. letter grading or the numbers on the. I think AUB may still use number grades on the 100-point scale, where 90 to 100's an A, 80, 89's a B, 70. In other words, very U.S. style approach to curriculum and so forth, with credits, and so on. And they award a bachelor's degree. And these are 4-year degrees. However, the Lebanese government has mandated that all universities give a year of credit for the first degree at universities for the Lebanese baccalaureate. And so those 4-year degrees done at AUB and LAU are 3 years ultimately. The one thing that I noticed that's important to note, and the reason that we call it comparable, is that if you look at the transcript, you'll find that that person starts with 200 level courses. And I think AUB used to still even use the word, the American terminology, sophomore. Okay. Now, the questioner is asking, well, why don't we do the same thing for the licence from Lebanese universities that are not following a US style curriculum? Specifically, the questioner asks about Holy Spirit University, Kaslik. And I just went online while Drew was talking earlier to quickly take a look at that site. And it's not as great site in the sense that it doesn't help me see what the curriculum looks like, see if it starts in second year, see if those are 200 level courses or if they even have a numbering system. In English, they say it's a bachelor, but the edge user clearly says that what they have on their desk is a licence. So I did notice that at a first degree, and I just went to business, I didn't know what our users' discipline for that licence was. So I just picked the first one that came up, business. And it's 99 credits following 30 for the Lebanese bac. That implies we've got a degree worth 129 hours. But, I'm not so sure of that. And I'd need to make sure that those 99 credits are, in fact, US style semester credits and not some other kind of concept. But it certainly looks like from the website that Holy Spirit University is attempting to mirror the US style approach of AUB and LAU. So the only thing that bothers me is they're getting a licence. Now, I don't know whether that's because they're going to translate the bachelor into French for universal usage in Lebanon or for employers or what. So I guess I would say tentatively, it appears that your licence does follow the edge entry for 3-year licence degrees, which is 3 years of undergraduate credit. Since, of course, we don't, as Dave mentioned already, we don't recommend credit for the Lebanese bac. The 13 years that it comprises, in fact, starts with kindergarten. So that's why we don't rank advanced credit for Lebanese bac. So, I think the jury still, if I were you, I would take a closer look at that, and I'd be glad for the individual to communicate with me directly. I think we've got my email address somewhere in our materials for these edge user webinars, and I'll be glad to help take a look and see if we can come to a conclusion. If it means we might have to make some adjustments to Edge Lebanon, we can, but it certainly bears much deeper research than just going with this one transcript and thinking, well, perhaps it's a 4-year and not a 3. So anyway, we'll take a closer look at that, and I'll be glad to help the individual.
Thanks, Robert. I'll just add, there's only the one public university in Lebanon. So the University of Lebanon. The rest are private, and some of the private universities are kind of more following the Lebanese system. Université Saint Joseph, for example, which it runs, Lebanese kind of comparable to the public university programs leading to the national degree. And then you have the private universities that are much more geared to the US system. And I believe that it's true that in Lebanon, if you get a private university bachelor degree based on your completion of the Lebanese baccalaureate, the final year, which we would call grade 12, 13th year in the system, including kindergarten, the Lebanese government only recognizes your bachelor from a U.S. style university in Lebanon if you've actually completed the final year of the BAC. So they're making kind of a distinction amongst, you know, the distinction that we're making, kind of complicates the issue just a little bit. We're moving on to after Lebanon, we have a question about Pakistan, where there's an entry for non-engineering two-year masters. Kind of similar entry be added for Bangladesh for the 4+2 system. Leslie Clausen Eicher from the IESC is currently doing a very comprehensive revamp of the Bangladesh pages. So indeed, those changes will be reflected in the future as soon as the council can vote all those. That's correct, isn't it, council people?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And we'll scroll down to the next one. This is about verification of secondary school and higher secondary school certificate results. On Acro, there's an unsecure link to verify results. Which link should we be using? I'm going to open that up. Shelby, you want to weigh in there?
Yeah. This is kind of a hobby of mine, a passion of mine, I guess I should say. And I will tell you that these links change with great regularity. I've looked back through my own internal records because we keep an in-house list of verification sources. And the Bangladesh links have changed 4 times, excuse me, in the last 3 years. So it's entirely possible that, yes, the link that is now different than the one that's on Edge. So I'm going to double check the link that you've provided here to confirm that it actually is a legitimate source. And if it is, then we'll go ahead and get that added to Edge. But yes, if you notice that there are verification sources that you're finding for certain countries, you're welcome to email those to us. We'll be happy to take a look at them, investigate them, confirm that they are legitimate verification sources. And if they are, we can then add those to the resource pages. So please send those to us when you find those.
Thank you. Yes, one person's hobby is another person's passion is what keeps everything rolling here. So we're all kind of in the same boat with credential madness. I'm going to skip the Abitur question, and because we're going to loop back to that. But this last question dovetails in perfectly on what Shelby was just talking about. It is indeed our aim to provide images of credentials so that you can see what the standard documents look like. We always and we're always looking for good examples. We invite you to send redacted credentials that we might consider for using, especially more recent credentials, color image credentials of original documents that you might have. So those can always be emailed to us using the link that appears on Edge on almost every page. And Drew will remind us what that's actually called. And so yes, that is the goal. And as new credentials come up, we'll have those new ones. Just looping back to Pakistan, now that we've got the Bachelor of Studies, 4-year degrees, which we're really not seeing those yet. They're brand new, coming in the next year or so. The first graduates of those will be updating all of those credentials, and there are still kind of legacy credentials that haven't changed that we don't have images for. So we're always looking for those, and Edge users are an important source of those credentials. Let's see, we're going back to the Abitur question. If it's the same Abitur taken over 12 or 13 years, does it make sense to recommend transfer coursework for the one taken over 13 if the content learned and the credentials are the same? And Robert, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the movement of some of the 12-year countries is to consider going back to 13 in the future due to some of the problems that has been caused by trying to compress the curriculum.
And Dave, you're absolutely correct. It's for that reason that they're going back to the 13-year model. And sometimes it'll be mixed. I think Hesse and Berlin is this way as well. Certain schools will offer the 13-year model, and then others will keep the 12 and so on. But the question is, it's a valid one, and it is a very good one, in fact. And the question is simply this: if it's the same curriculum, if you're going to give credit, does it matter if it's 13 or 12? And my answer to that, I sort of ran roughshod over it in my earlier presentation, so I'll try to be a little more clear cut on it. Basically, we don't want to grant credit for high school if we don't have to. Of course, we don't have to in a lot of circumstances. We could even say for 13 years we don't. It's inappropriate to grant credit if you really don't want to grant credit from high school. Jim Fry, talk about icons in the field, now retired from ECE. Jim always believed that you shouldn't grant credit for the German Abitur even after 13 years because it was all part of the same experience. It was the 13th year of school. What he was doing was differentiating between that 13-year pathway and the other ones that were all pretty universally agreed would warrant credit, and that is the British and the Quebec models, where they go to school for 11 years. In the case of Quebec, of course, they're going to get assessed the Certificate of Secondary Studies. And in the case of the UK, they're going to do GCSEs. And then they go 2 more years in a DEC in Quebec, a CEGEP in Quebec to get their Diploma Collegial Studies. And that's 13 years. And that's a higher school, a different school that they go to. Same in England, where they go to a 6th form college, doing lower and upper 6th, years 12 and 13, and so we grant credit. And then others built on that same model, like in the Caribbean and stuff, same sort of differentiation. So what Jim was doing was to say, now there's not all 13-year systems are created equal, and there are some where it's a continuous flow and you probably shouldn't give credit, and that would include Italy. The Italian maturity, they have 5 years after 8th grade. So in Jim's philosophy, you wouldn't grant credit there either. I'm told that Margit is now in charge at ECE and was his second in command at the time, said, Jim, you can either do what's right or you can do what everybody else is doing. And he shut up after that. But I guess my point is that I'd rather not give credit for high school. However, if that high school, upper secondary experience built on primary school and so forth, middle school if there is one, adds up to more than the American model, 13 or more, and as I mentioned before, Iceland has 14, then I need to strongly consider the possibility of granting credit. I think we've talked in the past, one of these, about Cameroon, where I was in the minority and was outvoted on the IESC because I wanted to grant credit for the Cameroonian bac after 13 years, and I wanted to count the 3-year licence from Cameroon built on that 13-year baccalaureate, because to me, 13 plus 3 equals 12 plus 4. 13 plus 3 equals 12 plus 4, and I found it unconscionable that we would recognize the 3-year British Anglophone bachelor's degree from Bamenda or Buea, but we wouldn't count the 3-year licence from Francophone schools as being comparable. So Yaoundé, for example. So I guess what I'm saying is ultimately, and this is important for everything you see in EDGE, it's only credential advice. It's what a few of us who've been in the field a while feel is what we ought to do using the quantitative or year counting model most of the time. Not always, but most of the time, certainly at the post-secondary level. So you can go against it. And I'll conclude by simply saying here at UT Austin, I don't use EDGE credential advice for the 3-year licence from Cameroon. I tell my evaluators, that's a bachelor's degree, post it and refer it out to graduate programs. Back to
Yeah,
you.
if I could add to that, I don't want to muddle or complicate things, but as Robert indicated, this is a credential advice. So it's all in an advisory capacity, and it really is up to the individual university or institution to develop their own policy and then be consistent with that. So as the person who raised this query indicated, the content is the same, regardless of whether it's 12 or 13 years of study. And when you have the Abitur holder, that person is eligible for the same university, same higher education, regardless if they were coming from a 12 or 13-year system. So that is possibly something you may want to consider in terms of counter arguments. If you do, or if you have granted credit for the Abitur, regardless of 12 or 13 year, see how they fare at your institution, or talk to other institutions who have granted credit and how those students have fared. So that's just as a possible counter argument in terms of how these issues are approached.
One final note, I forgot to mention that one of the best authorities on German educational system that I can imagine was someone I've known for a long time. She's retired, and I think she works as a consultant, but it's Karen Lucas, Lukas, who was for so many years at University of Minnesota, been a consultant for Twin Cities, and I think the Minnesota School District, so on. She is an absolute authority on Germany, and she always thought that even if it's a 12-year Abitur, that credit should be awarded also. And so, and let me tell you, Karen is a very strict year counting evaluator. But in this particular instance, as much as she knows about German educational system, she felt that 12-year one should get the credit as well as the 13.
Yeah, and then if you want to see her publication that happened to have been sponsored by IRF, you can access that in EPUB form, because it's now out of print in the IRF vault. You just have to sign up, and that's for free. That's just a side note.
Emily, thank you for that, because I thought it was impossible to get this book anymore.
Yeah, it's out of print, but because IRF had given her a research grant,
right?
She was kind enough to make that available on the IRF vault.
That's fantastic, because let me tell you, people, it's 2000, 2001, something like that. And so not that much about the Bologna process, but let me tell you, that is one major work that is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, a final note to Robert's final note, following up on Emily's final note. The European countries, through the automatic recognition process that they follow, don't differentiate between 12 or 13. So that's one way to kind of pin it to a reference point. Europeans aren't throwing credit around for one country's 13 to another's 12. The second point I would make is that one of the last presentations that I saw Jim Fry do, he's very much still with us and living not too many miles north and east of me. One of his presentations that made a big impression on me at the time was really inviting people in the field, credential evaluators at universities, to take the authority and make policy in cases where there was a vacuum of policy. And so it really is up to the person at an institution, if he or she feels she can get away with it, to formulate policy based on all these things. Some people have made very good logical questions and arguments in the comments, and IESC is a dynamic group, changing things all the time. The field is always changing. The credentials are always changing. So, these questions we will always have with us. But oftentimes there's an opportunity at institutions to actually formulate policy because no one's telling that you can't. All right, that does it for me.
And Dave, the reason that no one's telling you that you can't is because you are the person that has been put into your role, because you are the person that they want making those decisions. You are well educated and you can formulate why you're holding these various positions, and all of these arguments that are coming up. This is how you formulate that policy that you are able to apply consistently for all of the learners. So do we have any other questions? Dave, I think I might have lost you, but I think, let's see,
There's one other question about
Still
home.
here.
Perfect.
What did I miss, Shelby?
There's a homeschooling question.
Yes. I did not deliberately skip that one, as far as you know, but I remember that it involved a question about whether homeschooling, specifically, I think US and Canada were given as examples, would be included in EDGE at some point. And I don't know the answer to that, except that in the context of places, such as India, where you have an actual dedicated examinations board now for homeschooling, we would add that information as it appears. But anyone else is welcome to weigh in on this one. I don't have anything further.
I guess with respect to US and Canada, and I don't know that much about Canada, assuming that it's, homeschooling, assuming it's similar to what we do here, but as I understand it, at least in the state of Texas, how you get there is the issue, homeschooling versus in-class, public schools or private schools. But the point is, if I'm not mistaken, you end up getting a high school diploma anyway. And so I think that the answer to the questioner would be, it's only use, we would only put it in EDGE if a credential was earned that was not the standard high school, upper secondary maturity diploma, or what have you. How they got it is not so much the answer. For example, an online bachelor's from India or distance learning bachelor's from University of Mysore is going to be every bit the same as one in class. It's not done the same, but it has the same value. It's the same degree. You get it. You just, the way you do it or the way you earn it is done differently, but it's still a credential that's other than the fact that they'll notate that it's distance learning, it's no different from the regular bachelor's degree earned from in-study classroom experience. So I guess I'd say that we can put it in EDGE only if the homeschool credential is different in different in appearance and in wording than the normal in-class upper secondary certificate, diploma, whatever we're talking about.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, we're looking at the credential that is ultimately offered at the end of that academic journey, and that's where we would be able to give any of that advice. If anyone else has anything else they'd like to say, now is your time, because it's the top of the hour. Get an EDGE subscription, sign up for that free trial if you haven't already. As we mentioned, we're transitioning from the International Activities Group to go over to the exchange. You will receive an email if you would like to opt in to the future exchange. And our Acro Connect newsletter is updates on what we're doing within Acro if you want to stay informed with that. Thank you all for coming. See you next time, third Thursday in November. Thank you.